There are loads of rules and tricks to improve your composition. You can use leading lines or place the subject according to the rule of thirds, for instance, in the quest for that perfect picture. But while these textbook tricks are handy to know, there's one even simpler rule that will help you come up with the more interesting and original images every time. And that's simply never be satisfied with the first viewpoint that you see. Experimenting with different viewpoints can help you produce more interesting photos, but you'll also need to use different focal length lenses and techniques to make the most of these viewpoints and angles. So I'm here in the Somerset village of Uphill to show you how I got over 6 different shots of this classic church scene when I came here the other day. The obvious place to shoot this is from just inside the churchyard. From here I can use the wide end of a standard zoom and use some simple composition rules to get a standard shot. So I've used the path and graves as foreground interest, placing the church a third from the top of the frame, and we've got a perfectly good shot. But don't stop there, it's not the only viewpoint or composition that will produce a good shot. An even more dramatic angle is to get much closer to the church. Use a wide angle lens and angle the camera up. This isn't technically the right way to shoot architectural subjects, but I think it's a much more dynamic image than our first one. The key to this technique is to make sure that you get in really close and angle the camera upwards a lot to give a dramatic angle on the subject. This makes sure that it looks like you chose to do it on purpose, because if you only tilt the camera a small amount, it looks like the building's leaning over, and it just looks like a mistake. Staying in the churchyard, I can also try using shallow depth of field to give a more impressionistic feel to the image. I can use this cross as my main focal point and use the widest aperture of f4, allowing me to throw the church out of focus in the background for a more abstract feel. And while I'm here, I'll take a bonus shot by using the cross to balance the composition on the left and with the church to the right. This time I've chosen a smaller aperture of f11 to keep the whole scene in focus though. For a radically different view of the church, I'm going to take a bit of a hike, as this more distant view will give a completely different perspective on the church and its surroundings. From this small rise, I can get a perfect view of the church and the wider environment. Now, there are plenty of different ways to shoot this scene, and starting with a focal length of around 35mm, I can now include the cliff at the side of the church, which I couldn't have hoped to include in the frame when shooting from the churchyard. But you can take this approach to extremes by choosing a viewpoint even further away and shoot with a longer lens, such as this 70-300. This makes the church look much closer to the coast, and you can see the sea that's behind it. For my final shot, I want to include much more of the area around the church to show the whole scene. But I'm actually going to go back a little closer to the church, as I'm going to be using a wide angle lens for this shot, and at this distance the building will look far too small in the frame. Now around here looks perfect, but I'm going to wait until sunset to make the most of the light and colour. So remember, don't just take a shot from the first spot you find. Look for other ways and other viewpoints that will add extra interest and elements to your shots. And here's my final shot, which brings the total to 7. As you can see, another great way to transform your shot is to simply wait for the light to change, as with this beautiful summery sunset.